Okay, so my initial, so I wanted to chat with you because I saw you talking to Destiny about like the trans sports thing, and so this is I want to lay out like just two goals I have from this conversation. So I think we both share the goal of treating people well and making sure that they are uh, have equal say under the law, making sure that they are respected in their choices, as long as their choices aren't affected like negatively affecting other people, and that I extend that to the any community, whether that's the majority, whether it's trans, whether it's women, whether it's anyone. So I think we both share that goal, and the goal that I think that I want to accomplish here, that I think that you where we differ, is the whole like letting trans women compete in cis women leagues. I don't care about high school or like pee-wee leagues or anything like that. I'm strictly talking about like any kind of professional league or any kind of collegiate league. And my thing is because they have a unfair advantage as long as they've gone through as long as they've gone through male puberty. I think it's the data is pretty clear that the advantage that they have is maintained to such a significant level that cis women would not be able to compete with them in just about any sport. Is there any part of that
Yeah,
that you disagree
I, I,
with?
I do, and there's a couple different reasons. One, a lot of the studies show that, I mean, what we're talking about is as far as like a difference post puberty with transition is what we're seeing at this time is pretty minor, and even then, if you look at trans women competing against cis women, it actually isn't common that trans women beat out cis women. It's happened on a few occasions. There are very few trans women that are in cis women's sports. If we are going to segregate them, there aren't leagues big enough for them to, or there aren't enough of them to create a league in order for them to be able to facilitate having a sports league. It's disadvantageous to trans people who are going and participating in sports through high school and could otherwise have an opportunity for, say, a scholarship or to go on to, like, say, in baseball or softball or something like that, go on to like a professional or minor league type career in one of these sports. They're completely left out of the loop. So basically, what happens is we here's where I'm at. There are so few trans women in sports, and there are a lot of opportunities for cis women. Just like trans men could participate in men's sports if they wanted to, I don't think anybody would have an issue with that if they're able to compete on any kind of significant level. I'm not here to say whether they could or couldn't, but I'd say look at Buck Angel. Dude's pretty yoked. I don't know if many people would want to get in a barroom brawl with the guy. Um, so there's a lot there. I guess my biggest thing is we're talking about outliers, and we've made it a thing to where I think we're hyper focusing on really what are outliers. This isn't the commonality. Like we don't see full WNBA teams with nothing but trans women on them. There are some here and there. Like it's very sparsely laid out across the landscape of our sporting communities. So I like what I would challenge is that I think there is an alternative, and there is one I think that we could probably find some common ground on, which is to continue to let them participate monitored. I would even be okay with like some kind of hormone testing or something like that to guarantee that they aren't just getting to the point of transition and then you know not taking their HRT and getting maintaining their strength and then being able to use that. That would be disadvantageous to women, and I don't think that's a fair. a fair thing for women. But if they're on their HRT and their endocrine and estrogen levels are at a level that's at least fairly comparable, I think that that's fine. I mean, the International Olympic Committee has said that's fine.
Hmm.
People who are much smarter than me that are physicians and specialists in this field, Jangles, is another one. Who talks about it. So, no, I now if we do get to the point where we are seeing trans women overrun cis women's sports, I absolutely agree. Let's take a look back, but I'm kind of in this wait and see moment right now. It's not that I'm averse to potentially down the line saying, "Hey, yeah, maybe there's enough athletes that are trans athletes now, and they have enough of a competitive advantage. There could feasibly be a league for them, or feasibly be a college, some kind of college league, or the equivalent to like an NCAA. Um, uh, what do you want to call it?
Like just some sort of separate league that they would have,
Yeah,
whether it's yeah.
yeah.
Okay, so
I just want to get to a point where we're there. I think there's a lot of science that's still out, and I think that there's a lot of ways that we can continue to advance HRT and things like that that are going to come about over the next 10
You're
years.
brilliant. You're
Especially when we're talking
handsome.
about,
You're
like
rich.
you were talking about, how we have those pre-puberty transitions where there's going to be even less of an impact, but I would venture to say that most people that uh, want to transition are probably wanting to transition earlier than later. A lot of the reason people transition late is not because they don't want to at an early age or pre-puberty or that they haven't identified. It's that we lived in a society for a long time that didn't accept that,
mm,
and they're left with no fucking choice but to wait. So
okay,
that's kind of my perspective on it.
okay. So just taking like a few points there because there's a lot said there. The one thing that I would emphasize is that the HRT doesn't it doesn't get the trans woman back to the level field playing field of a cis woman. So there are certain things that when you go through puberty as a male, um, there are certain advantages you would get for athletics that a cis woman would never get. And HRT does not reverse these things. Some things not at all, and some things it does completely. So like let's say we go like 0 to 1, 0 being completely irreversible and 1 being completely reversible. So one thing that is completely reversible is like hemoglobin. It's been shown that over extended periods of time with HRT, when you drop testosterone levels, uh, they can get the same amount of hemoglobin in their blood as a woman, as a cis woman. But there are quite a few things that are on the 0 side that are just not irreversible. So you have like the length of your limbs, you have height, you have the size of their lungs, the size of their heart, the strength of their tendons, and I mean, I don't have to explain as to why all of those things are tremendously important when it comes to athletics. And none of those things are irreversible, even in the slightest, no matter what type of HRT you take. And those things are extremely important in all just about every sport. And the advantages that are maintained are pretty significant. So like the functional differences, it's like there, I can send these studies to you if you want, like either during chat or afterwards. But some of the
Shoot
functional
them over.
different,
I want to look at them as well.
yeah, some of the functional differences in between, just this is between like cis men and cis women, and then I'll go over like how much is maintained. So in grip strength, the difference between cis men and cis women is 57%. Quad strength is 54%. Punch power is 162%. VO2 max. VO2 max is the maximum amount of oxygen your body can utilize at any given moment. And obviously, you can, this is extremely important for any kind of sport, especially endurance sports. And the reason that it's such a big difference between men and women is because men have larger hearts and larger lungs. So the amount of oxygen they're able to utilize is always more. And this obviously leads to performance differences in any sport, because these are the most important aspects that would give you athletic advantages. Now, as far as like what's maintained, is there are quite a few studies going over, and this is comparing cis women to trans women when they've been suppressing their testosterone for at least 12 months.
Well, 12 months isn't going to be enough time anyways. It should be 2 to 3 years is what you're looking at.
Right, but there's other... Right, but there's also another study that has 36 months, and the advantages are still maintained. So you have like grip strength is
that's a month and a half. That's 3. Okay, I got you. 3 years. Okay, go ahead.
Grip strength is still at a 13% advantage. Forearm muscle, just the abundance of forearm muscle is still 35% difference. The knee flexion and knee extension and hip flexor extension, which are extremely important for running, is a 41% and a 33% disparity between the two. The list goes on. I'll send you this in a second here, but and this is because those advantages that I laid out when you go through puberty as a male, that as a cis woman you just never get, and they're not reversible with HRT. So what this is obviously going to give them an unfair advantage in a number of athletic events. And it doesn't mean they have to win. Like, you don't have to win to still have, quote unquote, cheated someone out of a spot. Like, a trans woman athlete could lose in the pool in a swimming race, but that lane that she's swimming in the pool, she took that from a cis woman. There was a cis woman that was unfairly competed against and never had a shot to swim in that pool. So she doesn't have to win the tournament, but she still took that spot from a woman who never really had a chance at competing for that spot.
Well, that woman also didn't have a chance against competing against the other women who took the other spots either. So
right.
That could have been anybody's spot,
But it
the
was.
Thing is that you're hyper focusing on the fact that one woman got her spot taken. But the simple fact is, we don't know where that trans person ended up on that list. If that trans person ends up somewhere in the middle, and there were people behind that trans woman and people ahead of that trans woman, that woman that lost her spot didn't lose her spot because of the trans person.
Well, no, they did. It's a zero-sum scenario. That spot there's one spot and there's two people vying for it. So she lost that spot because the trans woman took that spot. And like I said,
no, if she didn't perform as well as the other women, right?
Right, she lost those spots too.
She wouldn't have gotten a spot, or maybe have gotten like a spot at the very, very end. But
right. But there's still
that's the nature of attrition. We deal with that all the time. Michael Phelps has more like physical attributes as to why he can swim better than most people, right?
Mm-hmm.
Than many other people. We don't take him and put him in a league of his own and say you can't compete with other men because you have a longer torso, you have a longer wingspan than most people, you can take in more oxygen than most people, you have an ability to produce less lactic acid, which means your muscles get tired less fast. Like Michael Jordan's another example. All these people had basically what we would refer to as genetic predispositions to be better. And I think that what we're talking about, you can look at it in a similar fashion. If we wouldn't do that to men who have these genetic predispositions to do better in their leagues, why would we do that to women or cis women?
Because
it's the same thing.
This is like one area I think a lot of people get tripped up when they talk about this topic, is because we're actually looking for those disadvantages through sport. That's the paradox of sports. The paradox of sports is we are looking for quote unquote unfair advantages, but we're looking for it through the competition. So Michael Jordan, for example, he did when he was playing. He did have certain qualities, certain attributes that put him ahead of many other players in the league, and the competition itself, the games of basketball, we were using those to find that out. But in the scenario of trans women, we don't have to find that out. We already know that they have significant physiological advantages over the cis women. And then when they get into the sport, whatever it may be, there's everyone watching and the league itself and the other competitors know that this person has an unfair advantage versus everyone else. So we're no longer trying to find through the competition who has superior qualities, because we already know. And this is like the one area where a lot of people get tripped up on when they're talking. Like it's a paradox of sorts in sports. We're looking for quote unquote unfair advantages, but we're doing it through the competition. We don't know before they compete. And it's also the fact that when men, this is why men and women's leagues are separate, because if women competed with men, you would never find those qualities in the woman. So, like for instance, like let's say you take Serena Williams. Serena Williams is probably the best female tennis player maybe ever. But and you take Rafael Nadal, they have the same qualities that make you great at tennis, whatever that may be. You know, speed of serve. Their lean body mass, their Vo2 Max, their agility, all of that. They embody the same qualities, but the fact that Rafael Nadal is a male, he has those qualities to the nth degree that Venus can never achieve. So we're trying to find these qualities that women possess and these qualities that men possess, and they're the same qualities. But if we combine the men and the women in the league, you will never find those qualities in the woman, because they will never be anywhere near the top of their division or league or whatever it is.
Well, I mean, yes and no. We don't know. We haven't done it.
No, we
Like
do
that's the
know.
whole thing. We make these judgment calls. We say, hey, this is how it's gonna be because that's what I think because
No,
of
this is
and you've admittedly said that the science is not solid on this. It's
no.
nowhere
I didn't
near
say that.
solid.
The science is pretty solid. The science is
It's not. It's
it
really not. And
it
most
is.
scientists, most biologists will tell you the same thing. I'd encourage you to go watch Jangle's video because he breaks it down pretty fucking well.
I
There's
I don't know
lots
who
of stuff.
Jangles is, but I've read a lot of the papers on this, and I've there's a really good like he's an exercise, you would call him like a sport exercise scientist. His name's Ross Tucker, that has been doing a lot of work on this, and there is massive advantages, and we know this. This is why we separate women and men's sports, because I outline them. Like there are massive physiological differences that manifest themselves in athletic events to be massively disparaging. And this is why we protect a women's league, because there would be no women's league without it. Like there are certain areas in life, in society
Talking
that
about Ross Tucker, the football player.
no he's not sure. I don't think he ever played football. He's from Australia, so I highly doubt he played football. Let me see if yeah, no, there is a football player named Ross Tucker, but this guy is not. He's Australian. His name's Ross Tucker as well. He's sports science. He's from, well, no, he's from South Africa. Sorry, but yeah. So there are certain areas in society where we would want to protect women from men for physiological and biological reasons. One is sport. Another one is like prisons, obviously. Because
Do you think that women should be able to make their own decisions about when and where and how they compete?
that women, yeah, of course.
Okay, so if a woman wants to compete, with men. Do you think that she should be able to if that's what she wants to do?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, and if a woman is content or fine with competing in a league with trans women, or if they're okay with it, do you have an issue with it?
If women are in the league, or like if all the women in the league are fine with it, then no, I wouldn't have a problem with it. But all the women in the league aren't. There are women that have issues with it. And then more so, even more so beyond that, is like what it causes politically is actually I think it causes far more harm to the trans community because there are people on the right seize on the opportunity of people on the left who say things like there are no differences biologically between men and women, or they'll say things like they want to desegregate sports and just let anything go. These things are pretty silly to most people, and then people on the right seize on that and they wield it as a weapon towards all other trans topics and all other trans concerns. So that's why I think that this is like and this topic is going to keep rearing. It's going to keep rearing up every time a trans athlete anywhere in the world does anything significant competitively. It's going to keep popping up, and the conversation is going to keep happening, and people on the right are going to keep wielding it as a weapon, and people on the left are going to keep saying silly things like there are no biological differences between men and women. But I know if you could find a league where all the cis women were fine with it, yeah, I guess that wouldn't be that big of a deal. But you're never going to find that. Even if you find one cis woman that's in that league that has a problem with it, that's enough.
Find it interesting that most of the people that are having the conversations about this are usually white cis men.
Uh,
Like, do you
I,
understand that?
I don't.
I don't see any panels. I have not seen any panels. I've not seen any conversations where women are even talking about this issue.
Well, maybe not.
Where they're on a panel and they're actually saying something about this, or where they're speaking out in public. You know who's speaking out about it? Men,
But
and that says a lot.
but
It infantilizes women for one,
but that's not
and for
entirely
two,
true. The university.
where show me a panel that's been
Well,
done
it doesn't
or a
have to be.
conversation that's occurred
I wouldn't say
where
I wouldn't say it's a panel. It's bigger than that. It's not on like Twitch, but the University of Arizona swimmers, the University of Arizona's women's swimming championship, they released a statement to the NCAA on the Leah Thomas situation, and they were not supportive of it or happy in any way. So like,
Arizona just passed an anti-trans, anti-gender affirming bill. What are you talking about? Of course they're going to say that kind of shit because it's politically motivated. That's what they're fucking doing.
no. This is the University of Arizona women's swimming. This has nothing to do with politics. It's the University of Arizona Women's Swimming Championships, and the women that are in this league, they
You
released.
don't think that the sentiment towards trans people in a geographical area might influence the politics of the sport?
It could, but there's no reason to believe that given the situation that they're talking about. They're talking about the Leah Thomas situation that just happened, and this is the women's swimming league in the University of Arizona. So I'm not going to just
She's probably not going to win any huge championships, right?
right, but again
You understand that?
right, but again, you don't have to win to still have an advantage over the other competitors who are vying for that spot.
Sure,
Sports.
but there's other women competitors that are outperforming these trans women. So what
Right,
that should tell you
but they can
is
live
that
with
they don't have an advantage over all women. They have an advantage over some women who can't
and
compete at that level.
that but that's a problem. They have advantage over some women due to their physiological advantages. That is the point. That's a problem for those women. They can't compete with that. So there are
Train
some
harder. Train harder.
training harder is not going to make the size of your lungs bigger or your heart or your limbs or give you stronger tendons. It's not going to do that. You can train as hard as you want. You can't increase the size of your lungs.
They're doing something wrong because there's other cis women that are beating out these trans women. So
No,
they're
those
doing something wrong. They're fundamentally doing something wrong with how they train.
n-
If a cis woman can beat out a trans woman and keep them out of like a championship or something like that, which they do all the fucking time,
they're
then you're not. Then the point is proven that no, trans women inherently are not going to always be the best in their league or
I,
what have you.
I'm not saying they're gonna.
Even with that,
I'm
and
not.
we could say that about anybody,
But I'm
right?
not
Like,
saying they're going to be the best. I've said repeatedly that they're not always going to be the best. But that doesn't mean that they don't have that they're not better than many other women who are in that league because of their physiological advantages. Like, yeah, they're not the best, but that's because pre-transition they may not have been the best uh, male athlete if they would have competed in male sports if they didn't transition. So they could have been a subpar male athlete if they weren't trans and never transitioned and they just played in male sports. But that subpar male athlete is now above subpar when he compete against women, against cis women. He's still not going to be the best because he was subpar as a male, so he's still not going to be the best in the division. But he's still going to outperform many people, many cis women in that division, because of his physiological advantages that he has through going through puberty. And it's the same thing. This is the same thing with the trans women. Like I said, they could have competed in male sports if they weren't trans and didn't transition, but they would just be like subpar or maybe average. But then when they move to a division of all cis women, they're now not subpar or not average. They may not be the best still, but they're getting far more accolades and they're competing in events that they otherwise wouldn't have been able to compete in if they were in the male division.
and that may be because that's more aligned with what they are. They're internally they're women. You know, and when they go through their change, yeah, maybe they're a little bit more competitive. But I think you'd see that anyway. Like, there's no way in any facet in form in the way that we work that wouldn't be a possibility with anybody. Like I don't narrow the scope to just trans women. That's my thing. Like I think you can see that there are biological advantages and disadvantages with a lot of people.
Right, right.
That
But I've
that
already.
said, I'd like to understand what your prescription to solve the issue would be,
Yeah.
because here's the real issue, right?
Mhm.
Set aside all the biology and stuff, because I am not a medical doctor. I don't know if you are, but I'm not. I think a lot of these studies are interpreted however people want to interpret them based upon their point of view. And I would further suggest that there are no real, legitimate, sound prescriptions to resolve this outside of the certain circumstance we're currently in.
Right. So what I would say to that is, short of some drastic scientific change, the prescription is right now is to keep the cis women's leagues intact for their purpose, which was to keep them segregated from the male physiological advantages. That's why they were created. So if
So
short.
trans women who want to compete in sports, who spent their life in sports, do this. This is the way they make their bread and butter. All of a sudden, they're going to be routed out of the sport that they're currently in, that they currently make a living in, that they currently have a career in, and they're going to be sidelined, and they can fuck off, and they don't get to make any money.
Well, you're saying
They
this.
don't get to, they
Well,
don't get to do what they love. They don't get to
well,
do anything. Because we're going to take a whole population of people and say, hey, guess what? You can't fucking compete at all, because there's not a league. There's not enough trans women to get you all in a league and have a real league of your own. There's not enough trans women to organize any major sporting event.
well, you're
So
if
what
you
you're saying is that they get absolutely nothing for their hard work. They get absolutely nothing for what they put in. But we would be glad to pay somebody who is a middling female athlete that maybe doesn't really care as much to do what these trans women are willing to do and wanting to do.
right,
So
but you're
that's where I'm at with it.
right. But this is another thing that like I think just people kind of this is a colliding rights issue, is what it is. And in colliding rights issues, there's usually not a decision you can make that's going to make both parties happy. And that's what this is. It's a colliding rights issue. It's the right of trans women to identify as women and therefore play in cis women's leagues versus the right of cis women to have a protected space away from male advantage. So in that scenario, you're gonna have one party that is being quote unquote unfairly treated, because if we do let them into cis women's league, or trans women into cis women's leagues, the same thing everything you just said about trans women is the same thing for cis women. There are going to be a number of cis women that have trained their whole life, played in these leagues, wanted to compete, potentially go to college and get some sort of endorsement deal or end up in some sort of league, and then they're not.
Here's the difference between what you're talking about and what I'm talking about. What you're talking about is those women being able to test their muster and advance in the sport. What you're saying about trans women is we're not even going to give them an opportunity to test their muster. We're not going to give them an opportunity to even compete because there is no league for them.
Well,
There's nothing for them. Do you understand the revenue stream that people will lose? Do you understand the college scholarships that people will lose?
Right, but all of this, everything,
people who got to that place are now what you're talking about is stripping them of their careers.
Right, but everything you're saying is equally able to be said about cis women. You're stripping.
No, it's not. Because
yes,
cis
it
women
is.
have the opportunity to compete.
Right, but
what
if you let
you're not giving trans women even the opportunity to compete.
Right.
Thereby, by virtue of that, you're oppressing them because they have nowhere else to go.
But you're also
they have no ability to compete at all.
Right, but you're the
women do have the opportunity to compete.
Right, but the point you're missing is that if you let them compete, everything you just said about trans women can now be said about cis women. That's why it can.
It can't. No, the population is not the same.
But
you are talking about a very small handful of athletes.
And those wait, hold on.
As opposed to a huge, vast number of athletes.
Right, but
this is something you could put in the palm of you could put it. It would be like a grain of sand in an hourglass.
Right, but
so that's why I'm saying this is the hyper focus.
But this Jason, the argument you're making works both ways. It works both ways.
Doesn't.
Yes, it does.
Because of population.
No,
because of population, it does not. Trans people are the minority.
Okay, can I explain it? Can I explain it in a second? So this is why it works both ways. So everything you're saying is that there'd only be a minute number of cis women affected if we let trans women in. Right. That is true. There would be they would be affecting if they play in a team, like if there's a trans athlete that plays on a soccer team, they would be affecting the other 11 women on the other soccer team, and they're affecting whoever they beat out for that spot on that soccer team. That's who they're affecting. And you also have the point where it works the other way by saying if we don't let trans women into cis women leagues, you're only affecting a small number of the population. That's why it works both ways. Because you're saying if they get in, they're only affecting a small number of cis women. Yeah, in a way, that's true. But if we don't let them in, you're only affecting an even smaller number of trans women. Because they are such a small population. That's why I say that argument.
Not per capita.
But we're not. But wait, Jason. But we're not
a larger population.
But we're not worried about.
We have to look at per capita.
No, we don't.
We cannot look at just. No, we have to look at per capita because it's about a percentage of people.
Per capita has nothing to. Per capita would not.
It absolutely does. It absolutely does.
No, it doesn't. We're talking about the raw
effect on the broad amount of cis women is going to be very small. But the per capita effect on trans women is 100%. 100%.
But again, we're not worried about per capita here because you're affecting a person. You're affecting an individual. You wouldn't be worried about per capita in this scenario. You're not worried about the per capita of how it affects trans people because you're actually affecting the person. And the same thing when it comes to cis women. We
have an unfair society all the way across the board that will disadvantage one person all the time. But we live in a society that does that daily.
Right,
So, like,
but
the
this
one person does not count
but we're
above the whole of society.
no, but we're talking about whole numbers here. You're affecting a woman, you're affecting a trans woman or a cis woman. We're not talking about the amount of the per capita women that are affected. Do you think the women that are affected care that they're only 1% of the women's population that are affected? Of course not. That's why I mean when we're talking about it's a colliding rights issue. Do you think that the women, the cis women that potentially get beaten out for some spot on a team or lose a competition, do you think that they're worried about the per capita of how many other women that weren't affected by? Of course not, because we're talking about a rights issue that affect each individual person. These are individuals' rights, and the same thing goes. And
Nobody has an inherent right to play sport. You earn your spot on a
no,
team.
I'm not. I didn't say that, but they have a right to a protected league away from male biological advantages. That's why we have women's leagues. They don't have a right to play, but they have a right to compete at a fair level. That's why there are women's leagues.
Sure, and I don't see how I truly don't see how this is unfair when you're talking, like, again, I said such a few number of people. I really don't. I think it's a hyper focus issue. I think that it has been propped up. The issue has been propped up and perpetuated by people typically on the right, typically people who are anti-trans. I'm not saying that you are, sir. I know your true beliefs, but these are the people who are generally like pushing these talking points. And the aim is not to just get them out of sports; it's to get them out of society.
Agreed.
And
I agreed. That is what many on the right seize on. But the reason they're able to seize on it is because people on the left, they give them the hook to bite. They throw it out there and they say things like there's no biological advantage between men and women, or we should let them in because it's only affecting a small number of cis women, or trans women should be able to compete with cis women even though they have an advantage. People on the left say these things, and which are clearly, just like I said, they're just silly. And then people on the right take that and they use it as a weapon against all other trans issues. But if people on the left would stop making these silly arguments and these silly takes, people on the right wouldn't have the ammunition to then wield this around against all other trans issues.
they're gonna do that anyways. That's what the right does.
But we
That's
shouldn't.
always that's
But
what the right does. They do that no
but we
matter
shouldn't.
fucking
But
what.
we shouldn't give them the ammunition to do it. We shouldn't be loading the gun for them.
We're not loading the gun. We're protecting trans people.
No,
We're
not
we're
in
we're,
this.
we're protecting trans people.
But
We're
in this.
protecting the rights of trans people.
But in this conversation between the trans sports issue, you're what's going on is it may look like you're protecting trans women, and in a way you may be, but you're doing it at the expense of cis women. That's why.
Expense of a very small, probably non-competitive group of cis women.
But
Probably
it's
people that
also
would not even rank anyways.
But would you?
So
But why? But you wouldn't say that about any other topic. You wouldn't be like, "Oh, it's a small number of Hispanic people that are affected by this, so who cares?"
if trans men were able to compete in men's sports and they outperformed men, are you going to start crying about the fact that trans men are outperforming men?
No, I won't. But it's not. It just again, it won't happen because of the science. Physiologically, it won't happen. This is why. This is why.
Are you an MD? Are you a doctor?
No, but I know how to read studies. I know how to.
Here's what I'm saying. You're going to read a study based off your predetermined
I'm not though. I'm not doing
fucking
that.
angle. You're going to look at this based off your predetermined understanding or your desired outcome of the study. Okay? You're going to reach out and look for studies that do cater to what your ideology around this issue
I'm
is.
not though. That's not what I'm doing.
Natural.
That's
Natural.
That's not what I'm doing. Even the guy who's done the most extensive work on this, Ross Tucker, he's on the left. He's like a liberal from South Africa, and he's
I don't
he's
know
not.
how much I'd call a liberal from South Africa on the left. I mean,
Wait, just because
South Africa.
that doesn't mean that there's
Like,
not. That,
they aren't exactly a
But that doesn't mean
free and
that's
giving
it.
state.
Yeah, but it doesn't mean that there's not liberals there. It, it,
I
it,
think
it-
I think their liberals might be different than our liberals. I'll put it that way, but that's fine.
Perhaps, but again, he's on the left. He's of the left, and he. This is his life's work. This is what he studies. He doesn't have like some nefarious motive that he's fudging data or putting out studies or interpreting studies that in some nefarious way. He's just explaining what's going on scientifically between the physiological differences.
It would be more interesting to have scientists or biologists of opposing views on this have this conversation than you and I sitting here playing doctor, acting like we know. When we can talk about the injustice portion of it, but to talk about the medical science of it without any fucking degree or understanding of the medicine outside of a couple articles that we happen to read online, I'm sorry, dude. Like I can't I won't even admit to knowing all the science on this shit.
But again, you don't have to. I don't have to like be a trained biologist to know how to read a study and interpret the facts that the professionals found. Like
It's
we
totally
shouldn't.
possible you could be missing something in that interpretation because you don't have that study. I would say this to anybody having this conversation because what it does is number one, it cheapens the science because everybody's going to have their own view of what that is and what that looks like, and they're going to pull up their own studies and their own sources and shit, right? And the fact is that none of us laymen actually know.
But
You
wait,
can read a study all day long, but what if
yeah,
that study is fucking skewed? Did
but
you look at
but
how many people
but this is why you get
were
multiple studies. This is why
right?
and right and I've shared two. I have a third one as well, and they all come to the same conclusion that the physiological advantages that are obtained by going through male puberty are much of them are maintained even after HRT, even after 36 months of HRT. And it's because, like I said, that these are indisputable. Whether you're a layman or a professional, no one disputes that you can't change the size of the length of your limbs, the size of your heart, the size of your lungs, the strength of your
Oh,
tendons. You can't change those things.
there's no 5'6" males. There's no 5'4" males. No 5'3" males. There's no
No,
smaller males.
no, that's not the
That
point. No,
that
that's not. But that's not the point. That you're missing the point. If you get a 5'6" male and a 5'6", not even a 5'6", let's say you get like a 5'6" male and a 5'8" female. They're both cis. The male is on average going to have a higher Vo2 max, larger lungs, more lean body mass, stronger tendons. Yes, that those things are gained through male puberty, and they are irreversible. They have again on the scale from 0 to 1, they're a 0. No amount of HRT is going to change those things, and this is why it goes for. This is why we separate. This is again why we separate male and female divisions, because even if you have similarly sized women versus similarly sized men, there's massive advantages for the man. Like I said, the punch power of a man versus the punch power of a woman, cis, is 162% difference. That is, and even after HRT, that's only reduced by about 1/5. And it's because there are things that are irreversible that HRT does not change.
Nevertheless, I'm going to say again, it's not a big enough impact. It's not a big enough impact on cis women's sports. It's just not. For me, I look at a holistic, broad view. I'm not looking at individuals because if we look at individuals, here's the thing: everybody's individual circumstance is going to be something where somebody can say, "Well, they were disadvantaged this way, they were advantaged that way." So I have to look at the whole of things, and the whole of things is and this is where I'm going to kind of leave it because I got some shit to do. But The whole of it is, man. The whole of it is there are just not enough trans women and cis women sports for this to be an issue. And to fucking hyper focus on this does nothing to service the fucking anything. Because all you're saying is that I want to push people out of their careers and they can go fuck themselves and sit in a corner somewhere while we decide how we're going to figure this shit out.
Right.
And I think that's.
So can I ask you a question then?
To trans women.
So can I ask you a question then? So let's say there's some small rural town in Kentucky, and in that small rural town in Kentucky, there's only one bakery, and that bakery won't bake a cake for a gay wedding. Would you say, well, there's only a small number of gay people in that small town in Kentucky, who cares?
This isn't the same thing.
Yeah, no, it is. You're saying no. It is the same. No. I'm trying to draw. I'm trying to draw. No. I'm trying to draw the distinction that you're saying that it's only affecting a small number of people, therefore it's not a real issue. So in that small little town in Kentucky, where there's probably very few gay people, it would only be affecting a small number of gay people for that bakery to not bake a gay cake. Would you say that you don't care about that?
Those gay people are part of a very, very small class.
But it's only affecting a small number of people.
I would say that's different because you're talking about a much smaller group of people than you are when you're talking about the entirety who make up more than 50% of the U.S. population of cis women. Like that's fucking ridiculous.
No, I'm not. I'm comparing. No. You're comparing the wrong group. You said it's only affecting a small number of trans women, so it's not a big issue. It's only
It's only affecting a small number of cis women.
Okay, so even with that, even if it's only affecting a small number of cis women, their rights are still being affected though. In the scenario I drew up. That scenario, it's only affecting a small number of gay people in that city. No one else is coming to this bakery. It's only affecting a small number. Would you not care about that?
But gay people as a larger population, if we look at gay people as a whole, right, in your scenario, gay people as a whole have traditionally been societally treated poorly, treated like shit, treated in the worst possible fucking way. Okay? So there is a difference. You're talking about, again, a group of marginalized people that we can say, damn, it's pretty damn cut and clear. Them as a societal construct that lives within our society, right? Like that community has faced a ton of more oppression than anybody else, than a lot of other groups, right? So if that's the case, when you're talking about trans women in cis sports, and you're talking about that piece of sand in the well, trans women are the oppressed people here. Your argument says basically that, okay, I shouldn't care if it's a small number of gay people, but the reason I care that it's a small number of gay people is because the population of gay people is also already smaller, number one. And number two, there's been a history of their oppression and, their rights being stripped from them.
So
it's not comparable.
Okay, so let me ask you another question then. So then do you not then just not care about the rights of people that are in the majority class? Cis women in this scenario would be in the majority class. You're just saying you don't care about the rights of the people that are in the majority class.
I care about everybody, but I think that we need to make concessions for those that are the most disadvantaged. It's the difference,
but not at the expense of others.
It's the difference between equality and equity.
Right, but we shouldn't.
We're aiming for equity, not equality.
No, we shouldn't be giving, like in this scenario. We are doing it at the expense of cis women.
Giving it away. Like these trans women don't actually train or try to better themselves to be good at their sport.
That's not what I mean.
We're just throwing it out there.
No.
Hey, fuck this spot for
no,
cis
no,
women.
that's not.
Trans women
No. What I mean by giving is I'm talking about the opportunity. The opportunity. I'm talking about you're giving the opportunity. You're taking the opportunity away from cis women, and then so it's at their expense, and then you're giving it to trans women, even though the cis women are playing and supposed to be protected from male physiological advantages. That's the point of trans or of cis women leagues. So you're taking their opportunity away. It's at their expense. There are some number of cis women that now are not going to make a team, not going to play not in some sort of competition because the trans women took that spot, because sports are zero sum in that regard.
Well, there's always going to be somebody that's going to take somebody else's spot. That's why I'm
But
sitting
right,
here like,
but they
what,
have an
dude?
unfair
No matter
advantage.
what, there's always going to be people with an unfair advantage. There's always going to. I just explained that. We just talked about people that have an unfair advantage.
And yeah, and I explained to you why,
genetically.
and I explained to you why that the paradox of sports. The paradox of sports is we're looking for those unfair advantages through competition, and we're trying to find those quote unquote unfair advantages between both men and women.
We don't use sports to look for unfair advantages. We just.
I said
we
that's
use
why I said
sports
quote.
for competition.
But that's why I said.
It
But
has
that's
nothing to do with that.
it does. Tiger Woods has an advantage when he was in his prime over just about every other golfer that he would compete against. No one would argue that. He has an advantage. And once he starts competing, we know that. But the biggest part of Tiger Woods competing against other male golfers is that the most determinant factor is the female-male difference. That's the most determinant factor. It's more determinant than height, weight, lean body mass. Because the most determinant factor, sex, male and female, actually tells you all the other underlying factors that are going to be disadvantaged, which are height, weight, lean body mass, limb length, heart size, lung size. But all of that is contingent on the most determinant factor. And the most determinant factor is sex. Do you agree that there is massive disparities athletically between males and females?
Males and cis females, yes.
Okay.
Yes, I would agree with that.
Okay.
I would not agree that that's the case with trans women and women.
But
Like I said,
there is though.
I haven't read your studies, so I'd have to go through and read your fucking 18-page long studies or whatever. So, again, I wasn't prepped for this. You didn't give me the studies that you were going to cite, so I have no idea. I'm walking in blind to this with you. But
I'll send you another one that's like a kind of like a synopsis of those two studies. So like it has the links of those studies too, but it also is, it's not the scientific paper. It's more of like explaining the scientific paper. But so the main point.
And to your point, I will agree that it is a contentious issue. It is a hard issue to solve. It is a hard issue to come up with a resolution for. Where you and I differ is just that I think taking somebody who has spent their lives doing this and plucking them out, especially if they're already competing and active, and saying, "See ya," tough shit. Here's the fucking door. You've done a bunch of stuff for us, because it's not like the universities or the sports teams aren't getting paid for them doing their performance, for them excelling in their sport. They're getting paid for it. Everybody's making money off of them, and then you're taking away their lifeblood and saying, "Hey, you know what? We got what we wanted out of you. Now hit the showers. You're done. You're done here, buddy." If you have a prescription that you could put together that says, "Okay,
this is like one of those.
This is how we can address this," then yeah, I can meet you in the middle somewhere. But saying, "Okay, well, just screw them," like they all get taken out of sports. That's it. That they can just go do their own thing by themselves. Like I said, where there aren't enough people to even start a league. So it's basically like this is why I have an issue with the argument as a whole around it, is that essentially you're taking again, and I'm going to say it again, you're taking a tiny, tiny group of people, and you're saying you no longer have a career, you no longer have a scholarship to college, you no longer have anything. We gave them to you. Now we're going to take it away. Now, if you can explain to me how you're going to take that shit away and make sure that those people aren't completely fucked over, I'd be glad to hear that.
You don't let them. This is why this scenario. This problem is a genie out of the bottle scenario. This is why you have to get out ahead of it, because if you let trans women into all the cis women leagues they want to get in, you can't undo that. It's not going to happen. This is why
it's already happened. That's what I'm saying. It's already happening.
But it's not happening at any level of significance yet. There's not enough of them.
Olympics are a pretty high level of significance.
There's not enough of them in these leagues, is what I'm saying. Not yet. It's not happening yet. But if you let it happen, and there are more in the leagues, I agree. You can't undo that. And since you can't undo it, now you've just de facto ruined cis women's sports, because you can't undo it. You're not going to kick them out of the leagues. Many of them will probably be under contract with certain teams. These teams have invested money into them. They may have fan bases that follow them. Yeah, you can't undo it at that point. But what does happen at that point is cis women's leagues are no more. The competitive integrity of them is completely destroyed. That's why you have to get out ahead of it, and you have to protect the cis women's leagues, because that's what they were made for. They were made to be protected away from male physiological advantage.
Okay, but I understand we're already on the opposite side of that. There's already trans women making money, like Fallon Fox, for example, who's a UFC fighter.
Mm-hmm.
Who recently just lost to a cis woman.
I agree. But, it is happening. But I'm saying is, if you let it get too big, it becomes a.
What is your prescription for dealing with those that are already in the sports, that are competing, that, now you're talking about, okay, we're just stripping away their livelihood or their scholarships or their, some of these people, this is their chance to go to college.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they got into college on this, and maybe it's not even about competing in the sport. Maybe they do well in college and decide, I really want to follow my degree path and I want to go into a career. And it was through that scholarship that they were able to do that. Now that scholarship is gone. You're taking away those people's scholarships.
Right.
What are they supposed to do?
They
banked on that.
Right. But this argument, again, also works for cis women. They took a scholarship, or they took a spot away from a cis woman that was this.
I'm talking about what's already happened, which is that it's already occurred.
I know. So what
the swimmer you're talking about, like, what are we supposed to do? Does she get stripped of her scholarship and told, "Fuck you, hit the showers"? Is that what we do?
There's really only two things you can do. Either you do kick them out of the league or whatever they're in, or you let them, the ones that are in there now, currently compete, but you cut it off there and you say no more. Because if it gets to a point where there's more in the league, you are then creating obviously a larger problem, and you are eventually going to completely destroy the integrity of the league if there are too many in the league. So if there's only a few here and there, some leagues, I honestly wouldn't have an issue if some leagues wanted to keep the competitive integrity intact and kick them out. And I also wouldn't have an issue if they were like, okay, we'll let the ones that are already here stay, but we're now ending it there. Those are your only two options, because
you don't think that there could be advancements in CRT in HRT. I'm so on this other thing right now with somebody.
A lot of acronyms. No worries.
But so you don't think that there could be scientific advances in HRT and SRS that would suppress that further, even in people that post puberty?
If there was like some sort of drug that came along or something that could, then yeah, I would be for it. But I don't think that that's like physiologically. I literally think it's impossible, because you're talking about reducing the size of someone's heart, lungs, the length of their limbs, the strength of their tendons. These things are so far. We have no way of doing this. I would assume that shrinking the size of someone's heart and lungs would be highly detrimental to their health. So I just don't think that
Do
it's
you
even
think?
possible.
Do you think that? Hear me out now here. That okay, I could concede on one point. Let's say we didn't allow any more trans women into cis women's sports, and we did a shit ton more scientific studies on the impact of those sports, the impact the current trans population in those sports has.
Mhm.
I mean, because really, what are we talking about? When's the first time a trans woman entered sports where we saw any kind of true competition? It has to have been what in the last 10 years, maybe 15.
Yeah.
It's not been a long time. So I would say I could concede that hey, all right, we're gonna pause bringing more trans women on while we do more research and try to understand how this is truly impacting cis women's sports. I see no problem with that. Like I genuinely would meet you there on that and let it play out. And sorry, just a second, my kiddo just dropped by. Hang on.
Mhm.
Sorry about that. No, and so I could see doing that. Like I have no issue with that. Like saying, hey, we need to pause any further. But I don't think that stripping people of their current careers and of their current um, you know of their current scholarships and things like that. I think that you've given it to them. You can't go back and strip it away afterwards. Like that's horribly fucking immoral, from the perspective of what you're doing to that person's life in that moment.
Mhm.
Now, if they had caught, like you're saying, if they had caught it early on, maybe, we were able to like come up with something on the quick that could serve as a league for them from the jump, from the very beginning of when all this started. I could see where your point would have um, a lot more validity. And I do think not that there's none. I think there's a lot of validity to what you have to say. And I understand, uh, you know, cis women having some, you know, reservations. Absolutely. But I think that I think if we don't at least let what we have, the trans women we have now compete, we're never going to know how it truly is impacting women's sports. I think letting it play out, again, to cede to you, I say letting it play out with the current people that are actively in women's sports that are trans women, and being able to do more research on how it's impacting not just from a physiological but say a sociological perspective those sports. Um, I think that's a net win. I could meet you there.
Okay. Well, listen, that's it's probably a wonderful place because I remember you said you have other prior obligations. That's probably a wonderful place then because we've met on some common ground, and I don't think it's too far away from either of us and what we were discussing here. I think if they keep just let the trans women that are in the leagues now let that continue. If they were to say like, okay, we're gonna see how this goes, we're gonna get more studies, but for the time being, we're not gonna let more in because if more do come in and it does become a problem, well then we are actually screwed. So let's just t- press the brakes, get more info, and keep things as they are. But and that's a great place for us to agree on. But the I would say we agree on that, but I think that that's not actually what's happening or going to happen. I think they're gonna there are institutions and leagues, whether it be professionally or collegiately, that are going to let more trans women compete in these leagues, and I think it'll keep, like I said, it'll keep popping up in the news. Right wing talking heads will seize on it, and they'll use it to batter all other trans issues.
So do you think that maybe in like we could kind of talk about this a little bit. But do you think that maybe the compensation by the leagues is bore out of a fear of looking like intolerant or something like that, and so they're just kind of opening the floodgates without you know like really doing the maybe more of the research as well. I mean, there are things that I could you know definitely understand your perspective, and that's why I'm bringing that up.
Yeah, I think the leagues are facing social pressure to let them in, and that's what's causing it. I think like the NCAA, the Olympics, they're feeling immense social pressure, and then they're allowing it to happen. And recently, the Olympic committee, I think it's International Olympics Committee, I believe it is. Kind of they kind of skirted the responsibility and gave the responsibility to the countries that these people come from and compete from. So that they were like, well, we're kind of leaving it up to you guys to figure this out, as a way to, I think, to kind of shield them from social pressure, but also shield them from just saying, yeah, we're going to allow it. They're kind of skirting the responsibility and putting it on the countries from where the athletes come from.
Yeah, I see that as well. No, and I agree. I agree on that. I and don't get me wrong. Like I do. My first thing is that I want everybody to, definitely be on an even playing field. I want there to be justice for people. I want both cis women and trans women to have a space. So I am with you on that. Like I'm not averse to figuring out new ways to make this possible. And I 100%, support women. I know, if you watch any of the debates I've had, obviously with Destiny, as what you were referring to, I meme and I'll go hard a little bit, because a lot of times those conversations aren't usually very fruitful. But this conversation I really enjoyed, where we do have some disagreements or the need to come together with some better understanding. I think is, um, you know, things I'm willing to look at. But the things that we agree on, I think, are the important parts, which is that we do both want a more fair and just society for both women and trans women, or cis. I shouldn't say women and trans, cis women and trans women. And I do appreciate that. I think that people that are acting in good faith are trying to at least understand and find solutions to this are fucking right on.
Well, yeah,
So
no,
I appreciate you for that.
I appreciate you. I appreciate you coming on. I appreciate for having the talk with me. And yeah, that is my aim. I'm a smaller streamer, and hopefully I can can continue to grow. But my aim is to be good faith and have conversations without getting like super blood sporty. Sometimes the blood sports is necessary. Most times I think it's not, particularly in one-on-one conversations. On the panels, it's kind of a necessity. Otherwise, you'll just get bulldozed over. But yeah, when on one-on-one discussions, I think it's much less of a necessity. So that's what I aim for, and so I appreciate the kind words, and I appreciate you coming on and chatting with me.
Yeah, and if you ever want to chat again, I'm sorry I'm not streaming this morning. I planned on streaming. I was up till 4 o'clock dealing with some other stuff last night, but I planned on streaming, and I wanted to try to get some attention to your channel. So when I go live today, I am going to plug you. I'll give you a big plug and shout out. I think that your heart and your head are in the right place, man. Like, and I do think we'll get past, as a society, we're going to get past this impasse.
No,
And
yeah, I
hopefully for
appreciate
the
it.
better for everybody.
I appreciate it a
So
lot. Yeah, yeah. I'll probably see you around the Twitchosphere at some point again. Yeah.
for sure. And if you ever want to talk, just like again, I was a little late today, but if you ever want to talk about anything, I'm always glad to have the conversation with you. And I again, yeah, appreciate you, man.
Thank you. Likewise. Take it easy, man.